Now, many have been fixated by the absolutely dramatic footage of the volcanic eruption in La Palma. I don't know if everybody knows this. I didn't until this week. But the Yellowstone Park in the United States is a volcano so vast that if it blows, it will be the end of life on Earth. At least that's what my very clever friend told me. It would blot out the sun. It would reverberate so across the world that it would begin and cause the destruction of human life on the planet. So volcanoes seem to be something we simply cannot tame. And that might be the only earthly force that we have made no progress and presumably can make no progress in controlling. Dr. Richard Middlemiss is from the Royal Academy of Engineering. He's a research fellow in the School of Engineering at the University of Glasgow. And I'm glad to say he joins us now. Dr. Richard, these have been very spectacular pictures and footage. What happened? Is this the first time La Palma has gone up in smoke?
No, I mean, good evening, George. Thanks for having me on.
Welcome.
No, Cumbre Vieja has erupted about 8 times in the last 600 years, and presumably many times before that. So it makes it quite an active volcano, even though it's not erupted in about the last 40 years. Certainly in geological terms, it's quite an active volcano.
And is this eruption more dramatic than the one 40 years ago?
I don't know particularly, actually. There's not that much footage from the last one. And I should preface all of my answers by saying that I'm an instrumentalist. So my primary role is making technical solutions that could be used to help forecast eruptions. So I'm not a volcanologist by training. So any answer I give should be prefaced by, I'm not a volcanologist, but...
Very noble of you to point that out, because you're an expert in this company and most of the people watching and listening. I take that caveat, and I'm going to come on to what we can do to predict them. But it would be fair to say we might be able, you've played a part in that, to predict them, but we certainly can't stop them, can we?
No, as you say, these things are hugely forceful natural events, and there's not really anything you can do. You can't simply dam them. I should also say, I mean, they're very destructive events, but they also provide a lot of life. I mean, La Palma, the island itself, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for volcanology. The Canary Island sits over a hot spot in the crust where the magma can kind of seep through. So as the tectonic plate moves over the top of this hotspot, these island chains are formed. So La Palma owes existence to the volcano, as well as the fact that it's got very fertile soils from all the volcanic ash. But no, there's nothing we can really do to stop them.
I take that point too. But if something really big, like the Yellowstone one, went up, would the consequences be as dire as my friend predicted to me this week?
Yeah, I mean, Yellowstone's a scary one. I think amongst my volcanologist friends, I think that's the one that they would least likely to want to be present for. I should point out that Cumbre Vieja isn't the same sort of volcano. It's not expected to blow in the same way that Yellowstone could. But also, I mean, Yellowstone, if it went up, it could cause a sort of a nuclear winter, which could, as you say, darken the skies and things. But that's something that humankind have survived in the past centuries. And you know, if you're going for a holiday in Yellowstone, I wouldn't worry. I mean, something could happen. You know, it might not happen for another 1,000 years or 10,000 years. So we don't really know with Yellowstone. You know, these things take a very long time on geological scales.
Just before we turn to how one might predict them, what are they? I mean, why are they? Why are some volcanoes completely extinct? Some haven't erupted for many centuries, but then do. And others, like this one, I mean, twice in 40 years, is relatively regular. What are they?
Well, I mean, you've got a few different courses for volcanoes, and again, I should go back to my previous caveat of my previous training. But most volcanoes happen around the edge of tectonic plates, where you get subduction of one plate underneath another, and that allows sort of the sort of magma from the mantle underneath to come through and sort of melts the rock at the interface. Then you also get the ones like in the Canary Islands, where you have a hot spot. So that's in the center of a tectonic plate, and it's where there's a thinning in the crust. But the premise is that there's hot molten material underneath the crust called the mantle, and it's in the areas where that can kind of sneak through is where we get volcanoes.
Well, you may not be a volcanologist, but you're an extremely clever young man. And one of the things you've come up with is a means by which we might better predict them. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm part of a team at the University of Glasgow of lots of very clever scientists and engineers. And what we've done essentially is to take the sort of technology that you have in your mobile phone, the little accelerometer. So when you turn the screen sideways, the screen adjusts accordingly. And what's happening there is that there's a tiny little sensor that's measuring which way gravity is. It's basically saying, I can feel the gravitational pull of the Earth. Now you can use the same fabrication techniques to make very sensitive instruments where if I were to hold it next to you, George, it could feel your gravitational pull. So you can make these things incredibly sensitive. And if you do that, because say you have mass, or the magma underneath the volcano has mass that's or a density that's different from the surrounding rocks, if you put these on a volcano, you can start to see the density variations and therefore the magma moving up to kilometers underneath the volcano before an eruption.
And you've miniaturized this. I mean, previously there was machinery that could detect, but it was so massive and bulky, rather like the old computers before we got to the mobile phone. Someone told me you'd miniaturized this to basically a golf ball size. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not quite a golf ball size yet, but I mean, I think probably the main thing that we've done is make it a lot cheaper. I mean, these instruments have been around, well, hundreds of years if you count the pendulum measurements that were first done to measure the geoid of the Earth. But no, sort of these instruments have been around for maybe 60 years now. But the problem is that they tend to cost, hundreds of thousands of pounds, or at least £100,000. So in volcanology, where there's not loads of money spent, that's a problem. So you can maybe have a single sensor. Your funding might extend towards that. And you probably have to send a PhD student up to put it down. So you don't want to put anyone in danger. So when the most interesting things are happening, you tend not to have a sensor watching. So what we've done is use that technology that lots of other people have slowly developed and these fabrication processes to make a very small device. At the moment, it's about the size of, it's about 30 centimeters across, but you can make it about 10 or 100 times cheaper than the existing devices. But the great thing about having them cheaper is you can have lots of them. So going back to your mobile phone, if you imagine you had a single pixel camera, it's just a light meter. It doesn't tell you very much at all. But if you can have tens or hundreds of pixels, gravity measuring pixels, and wrap them around the volcano, you start to create an image like you do with the camera on your phone. So what we want to be able to do in the long run, and we're doing this now in a collaboration called Newton G, with lots of European collaborators down at Mount Etna in Sicily, is we're networking these things around an active volcano. And we've just started taking measurements about a month ago. So we'll watch this space for what we start to see with these devices down there.
Definitely, and I'm so glad, as the former member of Parliament for Glasgow University, that you're blazing a trail here. Why is so little spent on volcanology? One would have thought, given its potentially existential nature, that people would be very keen indeed to invest on trying to avoid catastrophe.
Indeed. I suppose there's, to take a cynical view, there's not too much money to be made from volcanoes. But I think when you look at it, there's governments do with active volcanoes do spend quite a bit of money. One of the main problems, though, is that 8 out of 10 of the countries that are most at risk to volcanoes or volcanic accidents are on the UK's Overseas Development Agency list. So potentially they don't have the money to spend. So that's why making cheap sensors is a good way to go. And there's, these sort of the technology to develop these things didn't exist 10 or 20 years ago. And the same with lots of other really cool instruments and sensors that are coming online. So I see the future being the case that you can have lots of different means of seeing inside a volcano, and that will give you more information. And if, at different volcanoes, if you get 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes warning, that could help get people out of the way and try to hopefully save lives.
So the future's orange, as they say, hopefully not a ball of orange fire. Dr. Richard, thanks so much for joining us. It's been a rare pleasure to discuss this with you. That was Dr. Richard Middlemiss of the Royal Academy of Engineering Research.